Gibson,
Here.
Commissioner McGee,
Here.
Commissioner Bill,
Here.
Commissioner Gatagano,
Here.
Commissioner Hyatt.
Here. Okay. You okay?
Boy, look at us all high tech here, huh?
Beer with me while I work the kinks out.
It is the first time I've ever seen a two-two monitor.
Doesn't say it now.
It says on the bottom of the.
It did, yeah.
Tutu.
And that's not what you had in mind, is it?
That wasn't what I was thinking.
Yeah. Guess we may as well put it to this
So, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, we have Zach Chalifour from James Moore with us today just to give a brief overview of the upcoming year's budget. So I'll turn it over to Zach.
Here's Zach.
All right, well, I'll finish the highlights. Good afternoon, first and foremost. I think the first budget workshop we had done, what was it, mid to late June? Of course, that was kind of the general just framework, where are we going, kind of just, high-level discussions about the solid waste assessments, of course, things of that nature. With this one, really the goal kind of is to say, okay, as it's presented, we do have a balanced budget based off of different assumptions. At this point, the millage rate is currently flat, where it was last year, which equals the tentative rate that was approved at the start of this month. From a solid waste assessment perspective, I know in the workshop we had talked about whether to phase that in or not. From talking with Jerome here in kind of the latest discussions, that has been reflected to increase the solid waste assessments. It's right about 50% to really get that on par where the solid waste assessment revenue will more or less equal within a small percentage the Waste Pro contract expense. So those two are basically on par at this point in time.
Zach, can I ask a question? That on the trim notice, it's more than what we are showing here. It's 350, and that's not what we've got in here. So why is there a difference?
On the trim notice,
Yeah, I just got my property tax,
Okay,
proposed
so the-
property, and the trim notice has got the waste,
rate.
the solid waste collection on it, and it's $350.
okay, so that one, I think Jerome, you had gone through to have that authorized basically on the high end until
Yes.
we had firm numbers.
Okay, so we
Where we had
went
our-
with a high, and,
Right.
but what we've got in here is like 340?
320.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a summary. Oops.
From the last meeting, I had gone at the high
Yeah,
end.
I remember
so
now
that,
the
you know,
discussion
we
about
can always
going high
reduce
and
it.
we can always
Yeah.
lower it. Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah, so currently, it's at 320 as an even number, that's 52%. That bottom line on the screen shows that coming in At the, revenue at 95%, maybe a couple $1,000s of the contract, which of course that's pretty close, but may vary slightly from actual. So that's again, we're within 1%, we've got those two on par at that $320 rate. So yes, lower than the 350 that was kind of established as an upper bound. Kind of like we do on the millage,
Right.
where a rate's established, we can stay there or go down, can't go up without manually reaching back out to everybody, kind of sending our own trim notice or our own non-ad valorem notice, which you don't want to have to go through the cost of doing that manually. So from the summary standpoint, those are the two really biggest factors. Just other notes in terms of making it a little bit tighter than anticipated is, as I had mentioned, the state puts out estimates for sales tax revenue, revenue sharing, gas tax, communication service tax. And those revenues make up a substantial portion of the city's revenue outside of the solid waste assessments and ad valorem. We had put in there initially kind of a 10% multiplier on the final fiscal year 23, which was up a little bit then from our fiscal year 24 budget, fiscal year 24 budget as well. Well, the state a couple weeks ago came out with those estimates, and the sales tax revenue sharing those revenues relative to what the state's estimates were for the current fiscal year, pretty much flat. So some of those other revenues we did have to scale back as the last few years were just, as you think about the economy and otherwise, hey, the economy's growing, inflation, just everything's kind of going up. Those revenues pretty stagnant. So it's kind of one where those numbers were ratcheted back. So I will kind of note with that, I did say to Jerome that, okay, it's a good thing that the solid waste kind of thought is we're gonna get that on par now, because where we thought we'd kind of have some coverage with those other revenues increasing, we did not get that. So just kind of note that in terms of, if you look at the initial workshop versus today and say, okay, why are some of these revenues, we had a 10% increase 2 months ago, now we're pretty much flat. Why is that? That's the reason why for those couple different line items. The other item of note, which we had talked about, is you'll see here, which is going to be pretty much, I think, new to probably the way the city has ever done things, is we have a column for what's called special revenue. And we had talked about a little bit theoretically last time, but just to kind of cover the concept there. So in governmental accounting, as a municipality, general purpose government, the general fund is always going to be your primary operating fund. As you get into larger governments, so you go to some cities, you'll see 20, 30 funds. Volusia County has over 100 different funds. In this process, we've established to create a second fund, which we call the grant fund. And the concept here is, in general, other funds may be established. There's certain accounting criteria over what types of funds and things like that. There's occasionally some revenue sources that require a separate accounting for the activity in those funds. But oftentimes it's one where it's more of a discretionary decision to say, hey, in order to have better transparency, make everything a little bit easier to follow, easier to digest, you get into the discussion of, well, what do we want to have separately? So for instance, solid waste is one that some cities will have that as a separate, what's called enterprise fund. And that's probably more common for, there's a few cities that do self-operate their own garbage, so it gives you a little more transparency over here's all the costs that you have and the related revenue. In this case, because we're pretty much dollar for dollar, it's easy enough to see here's the solid waste revenue, here's the contract, that I don't see a major need to say, hey, let's have this in a separate fund. But where things have gotten a little more harder to follow, maybe muddied compared to prior years, is all of the grant funding that the city's received, because we talked about a couple $1 million budget, add in more than the normal budget in grant funds and kind of have these inflated numbers compared to what we see operationally. Of course, dealing with the timing differences where we have expenditures that hit the financial statements, but those revenues operationally, functionally, don't really hit until the cash comes in. We get to the end of the fiscal year, we will go ahead and book a receivable to say, we incurred these expenditures tied to an SRF loan. We anticipate receiving reimbursement, but did not receive it prior to September 30th, and that receivable will get recorded to show those revenues basically going to be one-to-one with the expenses for the year-end financial statements and the audit. What this does is it kind of says, let's put all the grant activity into a separate bucket so we can isolate that and see that, but more importantly, the way I look at it is it gives us a better feel to truly say, hey, operationally, what does it look like? What's the revenue coming in, what are our expenditures, and if we have a match or something like that, we would show that as a transfer or an expense out of the general fund into the grant fund to basically say, hey, we've got a $3 million project, 2.9 million, we'll say, comes from the grants, 100,000 from the city, so we would show that movement from the general fund into the grant fund to cover that city's share. Again, really with the core objective of saying, let's be able to still, as was done kind of prior to all these grants without as much effort, show all of the operational activity in its own bucket to really have that picture of where things stand versus have, oh, well, this is the ARPA money revenue, this is this grant revenue, this is this state appropriation, and having to kind of back all those out or look around all those to just say, hey, where are we on a day-to-day basis? What do things look like? So that's the reason that we have these two columns. The special revenue column, at this point, that $2.9 million was tied into kind of projected what we'll have left to be spent on current grant awards, things of that nature. But again, conceptually, the biggest key there is that's just going to, when all is said and done, be dollar in, dollar out related to any grants that these cities receiving with septic to sewer, everything else that has been ongoing. Any high-level questions at this point? All right. Format in here, I don't recall for the prior workshop if we had as many schedules, but just to kind of quickly walk through what's in the packet. The first page is the summary page, kind of in the trim required format. So assuming if there were no changes, this is basically part of the advertisement that would go in the newspaper following the first public hearing in September as it relates to advertise the second public hearing. So just again, a very summarized format of the two different types of funds and what the total is for the entire city, along with the millage being stated, which is again equal to last year's millage as we currently stand. The summary here is just basically that same level of information, just in kind of more casual format. And then this overall comparative says, let's roll it up citywide. Now that we have separate funds, this just says, hey, across both of those funds, what do we have this year, and start building these historicals. So I know last year we went through this process. It was kind of, here's the best that we've got currently, pulling in prior years. Now that we've got that history in our software and otherwise, it'll be very easy to kind of quickly give that context and see the last couple of years, how have things changed, how have things evolved. With having separate funds, we'll do a separate schedule for each of the funds to kind of see that comparative information at the fund level. So we have one for the general fund, and then the grants fund we've identified as Fund 101. Again, that will be kept tracked separately related to any state or other grant funds. The detailed budget, very similar to what we had gone through a couple months ago. Of course, 2 months ago, I kind of said, hey, this is unbalanced, just to kind of talk through what we are projecting, any of the kind of needs identified by Jerome and discussed by the commission to start just building everything and have a starting point. So where we have any key assumptions, those have been identified here. So I won't go through everything in great detail. At first, at least, we can dive through anything further as required. On the ad valorem side, just to kind of do a quick recap of that. Based on the valuation, we're up about 11.6% in terms of that total valuation on the ad valorem valuation. Of that, 4.8% was new construction, so about a 7% increase on existing properties. The rollback rate would be down to about 5.32 from that 5.68 level. And just for kind of quick comparative purposes in terms of what's the dollar impact that we're talking about, it's about a $74,000 differential between the same as last year tax rate and that rollback rate. And then in this bottom side here is where we have the summary of the non-ad valorem assessments, of course, being the solid waste assessment. And then on the payroll side, really had no changes from what we had here in the initial budget. I think we may have tweaked a position by $1 an hour or 50 cents an hour related to the city clerk and administrative assistant positions. Everything else is largely the same. And just to kind of, for the record, acknowledge the kind of overall changes from where we're at, is there were 4 positions in here proposed by Jerome, all of those being part-time related to an HR generalist, planning technician, building inspector, and parks maintenance worker. All of those, as it stands, are currently funded as personnel costs in the budget. So everything that you see on here is accounted for in the details in the various departments that those positions would effectively report to or be reported in. So just to acknowledge that from an overall personnel standpoint, how those are included. And then we do in this calculation show for current employees a 4% COLA or cost of living adjustment being provided for in their rates of pay from where they're at to what that would look like effective October 1st. So those are the notable highlights. I guess at this point I'd kind of shift gears to any questions, comments, or areas that we want to tackle more in depth.
Zach, we had a 10,005 pull from the reserve in '24, and I don't remember what that was for or what we did with that. Can you refresh?
Yeah, so in the fiscal year '24 budget, and you can kind of see here, I'll highlight it on the summary page, because that's the easiest spot to see it. Actually, I'll just go see it live. All right, so we see it's use of reserves to the tune of 10,500.
Right.
What that related to really last year was as we went through the process and said, here's our best guess as to revenues, and here's our expenditures, we were 10,500 short in terms of current year revenues relative to what we were going to be spending. So basically that 10,005 was more or less to make things balance, to say, hey, our budget we've identified on the expense side from what we're projecting in revenues, we're a little bit short, so that was budgeted to have that in reserves available to cover the gap effectively if we were in fact in the hole by that amount based on that expense budget and with what came in. So the overall process really is to say, the expense budget is what drives everything. When we talk about adopting the budget, it really statutorily is all geared upon the premise that what this bottom line expenditure number is that gets adopted is that's how the commission provides authority to staff to spend money. So effectively, if there were no budget adopted, Jerome would have no authority to spend a single penny. So the expenditure budget kind of provides for we have the authority to spend it. The revenue side is more so what is anticipated in terms of how we're going to fund that. So that the thought process would be, hey, if revenues were up, we're under budget, we're actually not going to eat into reserves, or we eat more into reserves depending how things shake out. This is kind of the guess to say, hey, to fund this budget, this is where we expect those funds will become available from.
All right. Hey, Jerome, I got a question on the subgroup 519 under general funds, government, and we had the animal control, and we're budgeting 10,000, right? In 23, we had 15,000, so I'm amazed that that would go down.
So I think that one was generally geared from the trend side, where, so like that $7,000? That was the actual for fiscal year 23.
Okay, so we budgeted 15 and we actual got 10, so, all right, if that's the case, but that just, rarely have I seen anything from the government go down.
You know, we're not paying for TNR now. We used to pay for that, but we're not.
What is TNR?
Trap, neuter, and return, we used to pay for that for the city cats.
We do pay for that.
No, we don't. It goes through the county.
I will just add to that from a comparability standpoint, as you look to the adopted fiscal year 23 budget, some of the actuals that between some of the general ledger cleanup that we were working on for fiscal year 23 to where we're at today, as well as just the budget where, you know, we did this budget a year ago, it was largely driven off of here's any historical budget notes Con had, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to get that point. Jerome, we were here for that, right? When did, or were you here for the budget process last year or not? No, that was before
No.
you even too, yeah. So we were largely, you know, that was kind of, you know, what I had to go off of was here's numbers, here's notes, and then a lot of it was the input from you all to say, well, hey, this doesn't look right, or
Right.
or otherwise. So to some degree, compared to where if we've had continuity for 3 years, and, you know, we kind of look at that and I'm like, oh, I remember something weird, or Jerome remembers that there probably will be some degree of just numbers that you look at and don't have quite that comparability. Because, you know, what our process was, just to, again, give a little more context that may answer some questions that, you know, you all come across, is, you know, we kind of came up with current year numbers based off of a combination of just looking at, well, what has the budget been in the past? What's our trend in terms of what have we coded there to date in the current year to kind of have just a you know, make the most meaningful guesstimate from hard numbers. And then a lot too was just kind of, you know, Jerome making a pass through and then us having a follow-up discussion to say, hey, this is this. Based on having, you know, been boots on the ground now for almost a year, you know, Jerome, what do you envision as far as the needs here? So a lot of those changes were kind of, you know, from going through that process.
Right, okay. It just kind of, and makes all the sense in the world that if we had budget 15 and only spent 10, then, you know, don't budget for the 15 if it's a,
Yep. And that was a spent 7
yeah,
in 23. So we dropped the current year budget was 10. So that basically has stayed flat for,
Right. So,
for
yeah.
fiscal year 25.
right. Okay.
This question is mainly for whoever gave you the figures. Christmas events, 0. 2023, it was $3,600.
I thought we had accounted for that in some, in a different
That's-
line item.
Yeah, so that generally, so those were kind of sub-accounts, the way that it had been entered into QuickBooks in fiscal year 23. So those really rolled up into that promotional activity and other events.
Okay.
items around there.
Yeah, okay, you went from 82 to 12,000. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, so you can see like there was never technically a budget in those accounts. There just was kind of a sub-coding in QuickBooks, that the way it flows through into here, it shows those separately versus having it rolled up. Or if you look at like the fiscal year 23 actual, we basically had the 11, I mean, that's a small number than the 1,500, so.
Okay.
Those are kind of looked at in the aggregate.
Where on this is the loan indebtedness?
Yeah, so we've got towards the bottom, there's a separate line item for debt service.
So
So it's on
107.
page 14 of the packet. And just to kind of show on the screen here,
That's the 107.
yeah, so we've got the two separate line items, at least on the principal side, and we also have interest down below. So really the two different items accounted for is we've got the $39,000 related to the city hall land debt with SunTrust Truist, if I remember right.
Correct.
With Truist. So that's approximately of that 39,000, about 34,000 of that is the principal, about 5,000 in interest. And then the 68,000 here relates to the SRF loan repayments, where we do have the county revenue coming in separately for that same amount. So we do have to show those as gross because it still is an expenditure to the city. Even though that's being covered by the county, those are kind of independent transactions. So we do show that grossed up on both sides.
Okay.
And then I will note too, I don't remember what we had in the initial workshop. We may have just been talking theoretically on the capital side. We do have $80,000 provided for here in capital outlay related to the tractor and bush hog, which I think I saw those on the later agenda as well for further discussion. So those two are both accounted for in here.
I don't have more questions.
Nope. Mr. Hyatt? Questions? Commissioner Joe?
Yep. No,
Vice Mayor?
all good.
Okay. Since there's no further questions,
But before you conclude, Mr. Mayor, we do have someone that wanted to make a presentation to us because it may have some impact on the
No.
budget.
okay, certainly.
Miss Jameson.
Please.
Yes.
How long is that?
Hey,
Evening.
Well, hello again. My name is Bliss Jamison with the Southeast Volusia Manufacturing and Technology Coalition. And you and I haven't had the opportunity to meet. So nice to meet you. Thank you for squeezing us in. Mike, come on up here. You're part of this. Getting to it.
Never let a computer know you need it.
Almost gonna go on things. Where'd it go? Technology, I had it right here when I left the office. So bear
it
with
didn't come with you.
Yeah, but it's within the.
It's in there, okay.
It's in the, so give me one, and then, there we are. There it is. Okay, so the Southeast Volusia Manufacturing and Technology Coalition is, yes?
You're not connected to the internet.
Oh, Oak Hill guest?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I didn't connect. Thank you. Okay. Technology guru I am not. Okay.
There it is.
All right. So the Southeast Volusia Manufacturing and Technology Coalition has been working on, well, our mission is to brand, market, and promote Southeast Volusia as a great place to live, work, and play, recruiting jobs. All right, so we've been working this last year to take our website up a notch and working on all of our, social media posts, our job fair, and chime in at any time, and our publications, the Site Selector magazine, Florida Trend, and Livability magazines. They all have digital presence and hard copies. Have you been handing out your hard copies?
Yes, I have. And Southeast Volusia Ad Authority cooperates with us, gives us money, so it's not all on us.
True. Okay, so your contribution is a 10% of the overall marketing budget. The cities of New Smyrna Beach this year have put in for $20,000 and Edgewater for $20,000, and this year we are requesting $4,000 from you. Okay, so this is the website update that we are working on. Launch the launch pad for aerospace and aviation business. This will be the first page. I'm going to come back in October when this is fully ready. We are also redoing our homepage website. Please stop me and ask questions at any time. So this is the next one, talking about world-class infrastructure, our international airports. These, once the site is live, you'll be able to click on the airplane and it will tell you about those different airports and their capacities. We're also going to have another page within this for general aviation, which will have Mike's
Yep.
Airport and smaller airports. Okay. Then we go on down to relocate your business, the heart of aerospace and aviation capital. Being in, also on this slide up above, we capitalize on being within the technology triangle, Orlando, Embry-Riddle, and the Cape. And Oak Hill has
One of the things we do is we do an email list, and list brokers are very strange. You call them up and say, I need aviation, so they send you everything. Oh, here's Indianapolis International Airport. Like, they're going to roll that up and bring it down to Southeast Volusia. So they handed us a list of something like 18,000 names, and I went through it with a chainsaw and got it down to just under 1,000 quality names, people who reasonably will come here.
Okay, so Mike has been in charge. I don't know why my Microsoft keeps popping up. This is something new. There we are. Hopefully nothing else will interrupt. So Mike has been in charge of working on mailing list procurement. So this will be the second list that we have purchased. And we do e-blast. And we have a series of 3 ads that we send out through the emails. One is, we are SEBMTC, what are we, come join us. And the second one is an ad, did you already give that one out? About the work and life, and it has the rocket going up in the center.
Quality of life in the area.
And I'll be showing you all of this. This is just a quick update to give you a view of what's going on. So relocate your business here, the advantages, third most populated in the state, best tax climate, and of course, best business climate. And then talking about our launches, And then,
We're talking about mowing these days, aren't we? No, I didn't think so.
well, why businesses are moving to Southeast Volusia. This is going to be where the homepage video will be. And this year, we are, as in our update, we are removing all elected politicians and going with business people, because the elected politicians change all the time. So we are just going to go with businesses. And then it talks about businesses in our high-tech corridor. This is going to scroll when it is live: Blue Origin, Lockheed Martin, SpaceX, Boeing, NASA, and then it will have Sauer Group and others that are all within this tech triangle. And then it focuses on the good life. And so the good life, you'll be able to click this green button, and if you've noticed, all of these slides have green buttons for you to click and learn more, and take you other places, more pages. This will take you to a page for each of the cities, because you know Southeast Volusia is made up of 3 unique cities, but we are one economic harmonious community. So it'll take you to a page for each of the cities and you know, proclaim your uniqueness. And then Southeast Volusia in the news. Each one of these is a news article that we have put out in our newsletters. Are you all getting our monthly newsletters?
Mm-hmm.
Good, good, good. Okay, so workforce development and training programs in Southeast Volusia, engaging high school students is vital for our manufacturing. This is where we work on the pipelines. You know, we take a lot of the videos that we produce and go into the schools and promote all types of career opportunities and the pathways to get there, and promoting Daytona State College as well, and different ways to get an advanced degree. And then exploring at the intersection of technology and healthcare. We celebrated the new robot at Advent Health. And then it talks about our partner cities.
Well, let me ask a question. When you're talking about the advanced degree and stuff, is it all college education, higher education, or is it trade schools and that kind of thing too?
Trade schools on up, because see,
Yeah.
you can,
We're calling on trade schools.
Okay.
That's really where the action is.
Right,
and so many people don't know what they want to do.
right.
So if they get something where they can make a good living, these businesses these days want workforce. So therefore, they are taking a certificate program or a certificate graduate, employing them, and then if that graduate wants to go back to school, they're helping
Educate
them
'em.
with their education. So there's also the Florida FAME Sunshine Chapter, which is the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education. That is a program that takes kids right out of high school. They go to school 2 days a week and they work 3 days a week. And when they get out of their program, it's a 2-year program, they're debt-free and they have a job. Typically, all of the kids stay right there with that employer and go on to be advanced, or you know, they go back for higher learning. But that is a pathway for kids that don't have the money to go to school or don't know what they want to do. They can go ahead and be getting job experience, and when they go to these programs through FAME, a company will take them in and they rotate them through the different departments to see where their strength is. You know, one kid came in to Doherty Manufacturing thinking he wanted to be the electrical guy. He wound up being good at the CAD, you know, the auto or the
AutoCAD drafting.
AutoCAD drafting. So he's sitting in an air-conditioned office now,
Ooh,
you know, doing all this design work,
Working mouse.
and, you know, he's living a life.
One of the nice things about it is it lets us keep the talent here, because that's always been a problem. People would get an education, and, well, what are we gonna do for a living? And off they go to Orlando or Jacksonville or someplace else, and this lets us keep the talent local.
Okay, I'm taking you back to the top. So who are we? These are the top menu things that will be live, and you'll be able to click on them when this is live. Sites, it'll talk about sites that we have in Southeast Volusia. Workforce, give you all the different pages that go with workforce, the financial resources, and then of course the good life, which I was talking about earlier. But that was just a brief summary to let you know what we were working on, and I'll be coming back to you when this is live. And if you wanted to see the one that we have now, I can go back, but He told me 5 minutes, so.
Thank you, Bliss.
5 minutes.
All right, thanks, Bliss.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
Bliss.
time.
Good
Great
to
to
see
see
you.
you all. Thank you for your continued support. And I have to say, we greatly appreciate Mike Armour.
What I do? Oh, okay.
He has been with us and been instrumental in the design and growth and everything. And also, did you tell him we went to the space program
No,
on
I'm
Friday?
going to do that during the
Then I
commission meeting.
won't steal this thunder. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bliss.
Bye, Bliss.
I think the key here is that we're one economic unit. Because we get inquiries all the time, how long will my business in Southeast Volusia? Well, if they want to move to Oak Hill, we don't have any place to put them, we don't have any commercial buildings. But if they move to the Edgewater Industrial Park, which is, as I say, going to be 1 million square feet, they're going to have employees from here, everybody wins. That's the key.
And as you all know, you do have some economic, or some industrially zoned lands, which we are trying to promote.
Good.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Is there a motion to,
Were there more people to call?
It's a workshop.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Motion
Second.
to adjourn.